So I can't believe that I missed this when I was doing my notes for the last video. Welcome to Wisdom of Gore 8.1, Awareness of the Present. I know I talked about doing Assassin next, but I didn't feel like I could skip this topic that's in Nomads. How are the Bossk doing? As well as can be expected. Are the Quivas, a type of knife, sharp? One tries to keep them that way. It is important to keep the axles of the wagons greased. Yes, I think that is true. Traditional Tuchuk exchange of greeting and dismissal. In the formulaic question and response that I just read, there are sentiments of above real-world mystical traditions. Now, that may seem very strange, since it seemed like we were just having a normal, practical, everyday conversation. But if any of you has ever spent any time in Taoism, you know that practicality and the real world day-to-day concerns are very much part of the discipline. For instance, in Zen, there's a proverb that goes, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. How are the Bossk doing? As well as can be expected. Are the Quivas sharp? One tries to keep them that way. It is important to keep the axles of the wagons greased. Yes, I think that is true. It is a similar sentiment, and a Tuchuk's daily life would be the envy of a Zen monk. For the Tuchuk does not need to seek a Satori experience. He lives amidst conditions that pretty much guarantee that he's going to reach that Satori experience. If you're unfamiliar with the term Satori, it is a moment in which one is enlightened to the way things actually are. It's a very big concept in Buddhism, because the concept of Buddhism is essentially that human beings, by the nature of their mind being disorganized and undisciplined, and that culture, by the nature of it being a series of indoctrination that indoctrinates you to serve the culture rather than your own interests, that human beings are actually very far distant from themselves. Tuchuks have no distance from themselves. Wherever you go, there you are. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the eighth dimension. Although some people do attribute this to Jon Kabat-Zinn. The idea of the quote is older than that, and this might as well be the second Tuchuk statement. Wherever Tuchuks go, there they are. They are not people that plan like an agricultural community. They are people that live always in the moment. A Tuchuk is always observing his surroundings, reacting to them, and making any plans, such as they are, in response to them. He does not plan like a Kaisa player 10 moves ahead. He's much more immediate. He's much more in the moment. Now, you can say that's limiting, but it gives the Tuchuk a type of flexibility based in the real world and practically what he can do. It also means he's always aware of where he is and what he can do. And because of that, he's not overly attached to his possessions, which are always going to be changing, wearing out, or have to be traded when they travel. That would pretty much be a Zen/Buddhist dictate of detachment. He cannot afford to be overly attached to people. As everyone knows, they may die, be captured, or married off to another band. And this would be very similar to the Zen Buddhist idea of the inevitability of sorrow, being parted. So they don't get overly attached to people. Not saying they don't form emotional bonds, they just don't take it as this horrible, horrific, life-altering thing when something happens. Tuchuks don't hold on to emotional grievances. Now, I know that may seem odd to say, considering that part of Nomads is all about a revenge epic. But I want you to consider that after Kamchak has his revenge on Safar, who betrayed him, he does not take revenge on the rest of the town. Tuchuks have a sense of justice that comes about essentially from not being too overly attached to their emotions. They only allow their emotions to dictate their action as far as they are available to help them survive. This is not unlike a lot of Zen monks I've actually met. And you may be saying, well, wait a minute, what about the Tuchuks being depicted as being riotously drunk, lecherous, and avaricial? Well, let me quote something a Zen monk I trained with for a while actually taught to me about propriety. Quoting him, I'm not saying you shouldn't spend time meditating and refining your thought. But don't live by rules that are righteous just because someone told you that that is what's required. You could meditate and stare at that wall for hours, but it's probably better to be out drinking and laughing. That came from a monk. Zen Buddhism, and I refer to Zen Buddhism the most because it's the form of Buddhism I know the most of, and also the form of Buddhism I tend to respect the most. Zen Buddhism is very much about a human being a human being. Its definition of a human being, though, has a much higher set of standards than what most people think is a human being, and it's the same with the Tuchuks. A casual reader looking at the Tuchuks thinks, oh, these are just the Mongols or the Sarmatians or a steppe raiding culture. But after you get to know them, you realize the Tuchuks are just as moral as the rest of the people they're interacting with, and might be more so. It's not the Tuchuks that betrayed Thuria. It's not the Tuchuks that tried to deceive Thuria. Yes, there's some deception that goes in there for Kamchak to get Afris, but that's personal one-on-one. That's not a whole people betraying and enslaving another. Yes, there are captives in battle, but that's a Gorean tradition established from the first novel. Kamchak doesn't allow it, though, to go to the destruction of the city, even saying it's a good thing for the Tuchuks to have a Thuria. The Tuchuks strive to live in harmony with their conditions. And that is what Zen Buddhism is always about. Because Zen Buddhism teaches you to strive to live in harmony with your conditions, it is always centered on the present moment. How are the Bossk doing? As well as can be expected. Are the Quivas sharp? One tries to keep them that way. It is important to keep the axles of the wagons greased. Yes, I think that is true. Today in America, we'd say, put first things first. And the religious among us hearing this would probably say something like, be still and know that I am God.